I'd been out of town visiting my family for a week. My grandma, who lives with my parents, is very sick, and I wanted to be there to say goodbye. It's been about 3 days, and I'm staying a couple more. My girlfriend, who I've been with for 7 years, recently had surgery. She's in a lot of pain and didn't feel up to making the 5-hour car trip with me. I understood, she's still recovering, and I didn't want to put her through that. We've always had a strong relationship, rarely fought about anything serious. The only thing we'd argue over was housework. She's a neat freak, and I've always been okay with clutter. We had a fight about this right before I left because the house had gotten pretty messy since her surgery. She hadn't been able to keep up with the cleaning, and I promised I would take care of it before I left. I thought I did a decent job, but it wasn't up to her standards. She snapped at me, but I knew it was because she was exhausted and in pain. Now that I've had some time to reflect, I realize I was in the wrong. I apologized over text, and she seemed to forgive me, but something has felt off ever since. She's been distant. We barely talked while I've been here, and that's not like her. Then, I got a text from my best friend. He said he saw her at a hardware store with some guy, tall, long black hair, full beard. Not someone I know. My friend mentioned she was leaning on the guy's arm. And they left together to grab food at a restaurant across the street. I was stunned. My girlfriend has never given me any reason to doubt her. We've always been open about everything, even crushes, and I've never felt the need to worry. I know she tends to lean on friends when walking, especially since her surgery and her heart condition. She sometimes faints, and when we're together, she'll hold my arm for support. I've seen her do the same with her girlfriends, so part of me wanted to believe it was just that someone helping her out. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I casually mentioned to her that my friend saw her at the hardware store, thinking maybe she'd explain. Her response? I wasn't at the hardware store. Just the grocery store. That set off alarm bells. She'd never lied to me before, but now I wasn't sure what to think. Feeling uneasy, I checked her email. I know, I shouldn't have done it, but my mind was racing. I found a thread between her and someone with a generic Gmail account, Sugarlandman1234. The emails were short, but enough to raise even more suspicion. He apologized for not having his phone, saying he'd broken it and would text her from his dad's phone instead. Then came the part that hit me hard. She mentioned I was out of town and wouldn't be back until Wednesday. They made plans for Saturday, with her offering to buy dinner. I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just a friendly meetup. I wanted to come home right then, but when I told her, she insisted I stay with my family. You never see them, she said. Spend all the time you can with your grandma, she doesn't have long. She made it sound like she cared about me staying, but now I wasn't sure what to believe. To make matters worse, my friend drove by our house and noticed a white truck parked in the driveway. It had plates from a neighboring state, and my girlfriend doesn't really have any friends from there. The truck stayed there all night. My mind started spinning with worst-case scenarios. I called her several times and texted a lot, but she didn't respond much. She finally sent me a picture of our cat on her quilting supplies and said she missed me, but she hadn't called. She mentioned she'd been in the basement all day doing laundry and working on a quilt for my mom. That made sense, our basement has no service. So maybe she wasn't getting my calls, I'll admit, even after her call. The doubts were still swirling in my head. The white truck parked outside the house, those vague emails, and Dave's story about seeing her with some guy at the hardware store, none of it sat right with me. It's hard to shake that gut feeling, but I kept telling myself that maybe it was all innocent. Maybe that truck belonged to someone from her family. Maybe those emails didn't mean what they seemed to. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize things, the uncertainty kept gnawing at me. At the same time, I couldn't let these doubts take over while my grandma was still hanging on. She was fading fast, and I knew I needed to be present with my family, soaking in whatever moments we had left with her. As much as I wanted to rush home and confront my girlfriend, it didn't feel right to leave my family behind during such a critical time. I was torn. So, I waited. The plan was to go home after spending a few more days with my family. I didn't want to accuse her over the phone, especially not without being sure, but the anxiety made it hard to focus on anything else. What if the worst-case scenario was true? What if everything Dave told me was right, and I was being played? I kept replaying those thoughts over and over, while trying to be present for my grandma's final days. Still, part of me held out hope that everything would turn out fine. I figured that when I got back home, I'd have the chance to sit her down and talk about it, face to face. If something shady was going on, I had enough evidence, the texts from Dave, the email, and the sighting at the store, to confront her with. But until then, all I could do was wait. Wait and hope for the best, while bracing myself for the worst. That's the hardest part about suspicion, it eats away at you slowly, consuming every peaceful thought until you're left with nothing but anxiety and dread. Well, that next morning, my grandma passed away. It was a hard time for all of us, but thankfully we had the chance to say our goodbyes. We didn't have a traditional funeral since everything had been prearranged, and we just spent Tuesday reminiscing about her life. During all of this, my girlfriend was super supportive, texting and calling me regularly to check in. My family loves her, and she even took the time to talk to my parents while we were mourning. In those moments, I pushed all my doubts to the side. I was fully focused on my family and grieving. But of course, my mind kept wandering back to the texts and Dave's sighting of her with that mysterious guy. Half of me believed she had some sort of birthday surprise for me, while the other half wondered if I was being naive. A few people, including Dave, believed she might be cheating, but others told me I was overthinking it. I decided to take a middle ground, neither jump to conclusions nor dismiss everything outright. If she really was planning a surprise for my birthday, I didn't want to ruin it. I let her know that I'd be coming home on Wednesday after having breakfast with my family. She asked me to call her when I got closer. That was my original plan, but I was feeling homesick and just needed to see her. So, I got in my car at 5 a.m. and headed straight home, making great time. I pulled into the driveway by 10:30, and the first thing I noticed was that same white truck sitting in front of the house. I won't lie, my heart was racing as I walked up to the door. I didn't want to believe the worst, but seeing that truck parked there made me second-guess everything. When I walked in, I was greeted by the sight of a tall guy sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, casually eating cereal off the coffee table like he owned the place. He had the long black hair and beard that Dave had described, and he looked up at me and said, "Hey, dude. Welcome back." That moment was surreal. I felt like I was in some weird dream. Before I could react, my girlfriend came out of the hallway, smiling, and wrapped me in a hug. She seemed completely unfazed and said, "I'm so sorry about your grandma. Do you remember my cousin Max? It's been a while." I blinked, staring at the guy. I didn't recognize him at all, but then it clicked. Max. Her cousin from her Aunt Ellen's side. I hadn't seen him since he was a teenager, back when he had chubby cheeks, acne, and neon green hair. I could barely believe it was the same kid. I stammered something like, "Whoa, you've grown up." And he just laughed and said, "Yeah, I've changed a bit." We moved into the bedroom to talk privately, and my girlfriend explained everything. Max had come back to town to stay with his mom and was helping out with some projects around the house. He had recently finished trade school and was going to be working part-time with her family's construction company, while preparing to apply to a local college. She had promised to help him with the paperwork in exchange for him helping out with some renovations around the house. Apparently, they'd hit some snags and things were taking longer than expected, which is why he was still here. She also told me she had something planned for my man cave and made me swear not to go into the basement until my birthday. That's when I decided I had to come clean about my suspicions. I told her that Dave had seen her at the hardware store with Max and it made me worry, especially with the guy staying at our house. She laughed, saying she didn't realize Dave had seen them together. They had been shopping separately for most of the time and only met up when it was time to leave. She wished I had just asked her who the guy was, but she understood why I didn't want to come off as accusatory. After explaining everything, she was a little hurt that I doubted her at all. But she said she appreciated the fact that I didn't fly off the handle or accuse her right away. Max was staying a few extra days to finish up, which was a bit of a surprise, but after all that had happened, it didn't seem like a big deal. I was just relieved that there was nothing shady going on. In the end, I'm just glad I trusted my gut and didn't jump to conclusions. I know I'll have to make it up to her, though, for even thinking she could be cheating. So, I guess I'm going to be on my best behavior for a while to smooth things over. But in the grand scheme of things, everything seems to be back to normal, well, except for the mystery of what they're doing in the basement. I guess I'll just have to wait until my birthday to find out. Second story. I recently went through one of the toughest experiences of my life. I'm 24, and not too long ago, I proposed to my now ex-fiancée, who's 23. We had been dating for 2 years after meeting through mutual friends at work. It all started so well, slowly becoming friends, going on dates, and finally making it official on New Year's Eve 2 years ago. During the early stages of our relationship, she would occasionally mention this guy, Marvin. Apparently, Marvin had always had a crush on her. In the first few months of us dating, he would text her constantly, asking her to leave me and give him a chance. We'd laugh it off together, calling him pathetic for thinking she'd ever leave me for him. I'm nothing extraordinary, just a 5 feet 4 inches nerdy Asian guy, but I thought we were solid. Fast forward 2 years into our relationship, and I decided it was time. I proposed to her on New Year's Eve in front of her entire family, and she said yes. It was perfect, or so I thought. Since she wasn't working, I took on the responsibility of planning and paying for the wedding. I dipped into my savings, started booking venues, organizing catering, invitations, and decor. I spent a good chunk of my savings because her parents weren't in a financial position to help, but I felt secure doing it. Then, one day while we were out running errands, we started talking about trying new things, and the topic of a threesome came up. We're both in our 20s, so it didn't feel like a strange conversation to have. We discussed how we'd go about it, and then she casually mentioned, "I have someone in mind." I asked her who, and she said, "Marvin." Now, I know this should have been the first red flag. I asked her why she'd choose him after always saying how much she despised him. She simply said she was sexually attracted to him but claimed it would only be a one-time thing. I told her I was open to discussing it, but we'd need to set some ground rules and boundaries, and I wanted to talk to him before making any decisions. Over the next few days, she couldn't stop talking about it. She showed me hotels and kept asking when we'd meet with Marvin, acting way too excited. I kept reminding her that we needed to talk about it seriously before rushing into anything, but she just wouldn't stop bringing it up. It got to the point where I had to tell her to calm down or the threesome wouldn't happen at all. She apologized, admitted I was right, and backed off. For a day or two. Then, the excitement kicked in again, and she started pushing the topic relentlessly. That's when something inside me felt off. One afternoon, while she was napping, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling anymore. I went through her phone. That's when I found out the truth. She had been cheating on me with Marvin for months. They'd been meeting up while I was at work, and she'd even sent him one of those online BDSM tests to see if his kinks aligned with hers. I was beyond furious. She woke up while I was looking through her phone, and I confronted her right there. She burst into tears, apologizing, claiming she didn't know what she was doing. But I couldn't even listen. I packed my things and stormed out, getting a room at a hotel. Later that night, her parents called me. Instead of understanding the betrayal, they accused me of acting like a child, saying I was ruining the engagement and that it was all my fault because I had brought up the idea of the threesome in the first place. Her mom even said her daughter wasn't at fault. I couldn't even respond. I just hung up the phone. The next day, I started undoing all the plans for the wedding, everything I had poured my savings into. My ex kept calling, pleading for forgiveness and asking me to come back, but I was finished. Then her family began bombarding me with messages, telling me to man up, as if I were the one who ruined things. I knew the reality, though. I wasn't the one at fault. She had betrayed my trust, and I couldn't see a way forward with her. Amid all the chaos, I decided to reach out to her father. We had always gotten along well, bonding over shared interests and hobbies. So I thought maybe we could talk calmly about why I called off the engagement. He agreed to meet me at a mall nearby, though I could sense his frustration in his voice. When we met, he looked angry, but he still sat down to listen. I came prepared, with screenshots of the conversations between my ex and Marvin, the proof of her cheating. After showing him the messages, he seemed taken aback. He admitted that my ex had told them a completely different version of events. Apparently, she had gone to her parents in tears, claiming that I was breaking off the engagement because I had wanted a threesome. And when she suggested Marvin as the third person, I lost it and snapped at her. She twisted the whole situation to make it look like I was the one at fault. He then mentioned something that hit me hard. Marvin had been visiting their home regularly since the breakup, checking in on her while she stayed with her parents. That stung, knowing that the very person she cheated on me with was now playing the concerned friend in her parents' eyes. After we talked, he agreed to come with me to my apartment so we could pack up all of her belongings. We didn't say much during the process, it was just about getting things done. The engagement ring was still in the apartment, so I kept that with me. In the end, it was clear to both of us that things weren't as my ex had painted them. I felt some sense of closure after that conversation, but it also hurt to see how easily the truth can be twisted. Still, I knew that walking away was the right decision. Third story. I've been married to my husband for 3 years now. We've been together for 7. Honestly, for the most part, things have been really good between us. In fact, in the early days, we made it through some pretty rocky stuff. The first year we dated, we lived 3 hours apart, and during one of my visits, I found out he cheated on me. That was a gut punch, but somehow, we worked through it. He moved in with me after that, and I truly believed we had put it behind us. I thought we'd built something strong, at least, I did. Last week, he told me he had to leave for a few days for work. Apparently, his best friend from back home is dealing with some serious mental health issues and can't use power tools anymore. Which is a huge problem because he was in the middle of a building project. His friend's dad hired my husband to finish the work with him. So, yeah, it's a work trip, but also not quite a typical one. He said he was leaving on Tuesday and would be back by Friday. I didn't think much of it at first, but here's where things started to feel off. Usually, when he's away, he calls me multiple times a day. He'll check in, we'll chat for a while, and it's normal. But this time? Barely a 5-minute conversation since he left. I tried not to overthink it, telling myself he was probably just busy working or catching up with his friend. Then, last night, technically Wednesday night, he called me again. Another quick chat, maybe 10 minutes at most. But this time, he tells me he's not coming back on Friday as planned. No, now he's staying until Sunday. That seemed strange because he'd already sent me pictures of the job, and it looked like they were almost done. Then he tells me he's taking his car to get looked at by a buddy of his. Apparently, this guy is over an hour away, and it's almost 10 p.m. at this point. He says the guy will give him a quote and fix the car tomorrow. Now, that's when the alarm bells started ringing. If he was going to a friend's house, why didn't he just tell me who it was? He always mentions names when he's visiting friends. And the thing is, I know his friends, there are only 2 left in that town. Neither of them knows anything about cars. At this point, my stomach is in knots. I'm sitting there thinking, what is really going on? So, I decide to check our tracking app. We use it for the kids and ourselves to keep tabs on where everyone is. When I looked, I saw that he arrived at this supposed friend's place at midnight. It's now 3 a.m., and he's still there. And the address? Yeah, it's not one of his 2 friends' houses, I knew. In that moment, I just knew. My gut was screaming at me, telling me that this is exactly what I feared. I felt sick, like my whole body was rejecting what my mind was starting to accept. It's the middle of the night, my best friend is asleep, and I'm sitting here alone, trying not to explode. And it didn't get better the next morning. He stayed at that house until 6:30 a.m. At 7:30, he calls me, pretending he's just waking up, completely oblivious to the fact that I can see where he's been. He gives me some excuse about the car parts being seized and how the repair couldn't happen. Still, he doesn't mention which friend he was supposedly with. At that point, it's like he doesn't even need to say it. I already know the truth. All those little red flags? They've turned into one big, undeniable fact. He's proven it to me without even realizing it. Now that I've had most of the day to process everything, and after a long talk with my best friend, here's where I'm at. This morning. He called me while I was making coffee. As soon as I told him that, he said, "Ooh, coffee. I should go get some, I just woke up and haven't had any yet." But here's the thing, he had already gone to the nearest coffee shop before leaving town earlier that morning. So, another lie. They're piling up faster than I can even question them. I know people might wonder why I even have a tracking app if I trust him, and honestly, I wasn't using it to track him before. We got the app last week because our kids started walking to school on their own, and we wanted to make sure they were getting home safely. It was for peace of mind, not to catch him in anything. But yeah, it kind of worked out that way. So today, he finally gave me a name for this so-called friend he was with last night. Let's call him John. Now, I know of John, but I've never met him, which is why I think my husband thought he'd be the perfect cover. His story was that he went to John's place to fix something on his car, but they couldn't get it unstuck with the tools they had at home. He told me John's a mechanic, and they were waiting for confirmation from John's boss to use his shop after hours tonight to get the job done. He also mentioned he was waiting on a quote for parts. Here's the thing, though, John doesn't live or work in the city my husband was in last night. And when he said waiting for a quote on parts, that was the final puzzle piece. If they didn't have the parts yet, what were they even doing working on the car last night? That made zero sense. It hit me then, this whole thing was a lie from start to finish. The kicker was when his best friend, the one he's supposedly helping, woke up while we were on the phone. I heard him ask, "Did you just get in from last night?" I listened to my husband stumble for an answer, knowing full well I could hear everything. He lied again, telling his friend, "No, I came home last night, surprised you didn't hear me." At that moment, I knew he wasn't just lying to me, he was lying to everyone around him. That one cut deep. So here's my plan, I'm going to stay calm, keep it low, and not confront him. What's the point? He'll either deny it, flip it around on me, or admit it and beg for forgiveness, and I'm not interested in any of that. What I need to do now is get my ducks in a row and figure out how to leave. That's where my focus is. I feel humiliated. stupid, even. But more than anything, I'm pissed at him, pissed at myself. And to everyone wondering why I didn't leave when he cheated the first time, I get it. It's a fair question. The truth is, he really did the work back then. We went through therapy, he showed up in all the ways I needed him to, and I believed it was just a mistake. I was naive. And I thought we had fixed things. But clearly, I was wrong. I'll admit it, I should have had more self-respect back then. I should have known better. But now? Now, I'm going to make sure this is a lesson I don't have to learn again. He finally came home Saturday night. By that point, I had spent the entire week gathering everything I needed for a divorce. But deep down, what I really needed was proof. Proof that this wasn't what I thought it was. Proof that I wasn't crazy for even imagining he could do this to me. Instead, I found her. He sat there, claiming that while he did go to her house, he never actually slept with her. He entertained her, he said, but didn't sleep with her. Spent the night, but nothing happened. I just couldn't believe that. He said he only gave her attention because she made it easy. That was when I walked out. I couldn't even process it in the moment, so I went straight to my best friend's place. We spent the day drinking a lot. And even though I knew I was done, I still needed closure. I needed to know if he actually slept with her, for my own peace of mind. I knew I wasn't going to get the truth from him. I found her number in his phone that night after he got home. So, I called her. Turns out, he had lied to her about being married. He took advantage of her, knowing she had just come out of an abusive relationship and was trying to trust someone again. And yes, he did sleep with her. He even left his shirt there because he wasn't planning on coming back for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. He had every intention of returning to her if I hadn't found out. He made this poor girl think he cared about her, and it's disgusting. He didn't just betray me, he hurt her too. He shattered her trust, just like mine. So here I am, officially a 33-year-old single mom, absolutely terrified of what's ahead. I haven't eaten in days. My body has been stuck in fight or flight mode for so long that I ended up in the hospital, hoping they could help me reset. I just needed to sleep, to let my heart take a break from all the constant stress. I'm a mess, to say the least. But I want to thank everyone who offered advice and kind words. This entire situation feels like a nightmare I can't wake up from. Fourth story. Betty, 27F, and I, 30M, had been together for a couple of years when I proposed to her in January. It was a big moment for both of us, and we were excited about our future together. We moved in at the end of the month and started saving for a wedding we planned to have next year. Everything seemed to be falling into place. In May, Betty was a bridesmaid at her friend's wedding. I couldn't make it due to work commitments and the fact that it was a 5-day trip. She came back from the wedding in high spirits after reconnecting with some old friends. But a few weeks later, things started to shift. Betty became distant, moody, and withdrawn. I tried asking her what was wrong, but she wasn't ready to open up. So when she told me she had made an appointment with a therapist, I felt relieved. At least she was trying to deal with whatever was troubling her. After about 5 or 6 therapy sessions, Betty sat me down one Saturday morning. I knew it was going to be serious, but I wasn't prepared for what she was about to tell me. She started by explaining how she was raised in a conservative household, which forced her to suppress certain desires. She said that during the wedding, she had met a woman who stirred up feelings she had long denied, feelings of attraction toward other women. Betty told me she realized she was bisexual and had been struggling to come to terms with it. I listened, taking it all in. It was an emotional moment for both of us. I told her I was happy she felt safe enough to share this with me and that it didn't change how I felt about her. I still loved her. But then Betty asked if she could explore this newfound part of her identity. She wanted to experience being with a woman, and I was open to the idea of exploring it together, maybe even having a threesome, but she wanted something different. She wanted a one-on-one experience, just her and another woman, and she didn't want me involved. That's when it started to feel like a potential affair, and I told her I wasn't comfortable with that. I asked her if she was thinking of canceling the wedding or if she wanted some time apart to figure things out. She was firm that she didn't want that. She still wanted to marry me, still loved me, but she also felt like she had to explore these feelings before we settled down. Naturally, I had to ask if something had already happened at the wedding. Had she cheated on me? Did she have someone in mind? Betty admitted to kissing a girl at the reception after dancing with her all night, but she insisted that nothing else had happened. She wasn't talking to anyone or planning anything, she said. She just wanted to be honest with me about what she was feeling. Betty didn't expect an answer right away, just asked me to keep an open mind and to keep talking about it. I couldn't make any promises but agreed to do some research and talk to a friend of mine who's in an open marriage to get some perspective. I warned her, though, if I found out she lied or went behind my back, that would be it. No second chances. My friend at work has been really open about how he and his wife navigate their relationship, which has helped me understand this whole concept better. My brother also got me into a support group, which has been a huge help in coming to terms with everything. I've been reading books on the subject, trying to make sense of where we stand, and I finally felt ready to sit Betty down for another talk. On Thursday night, we had our check-in. I'd found us a couples therapist, handed her one of the books I'd finished, and suggested we postpone the wedding for 6 months. That way, we'd have time to figure out if getting married was still the right path for us. I was on a roll, feeling like I had things under control, when Betty stopped me and asked, "Are you planning on dating other people too?" It was like that idea had never crossed her mind, that I might want the same freedom she was asking for. When I said I was considering it, her whole demeanor changed. She barely spoke after that, giving me short, one-word answers to everything. The longest thing she said was, "I just don't know." That was 24 hours ago, and since then, she's been lost in her own world, barely acknowledging me. I'm bracing myself for the emotional storm that's bound to come, but part of me is surprised she's not happy I'm even open to the idea of an open relationship. I thought this was what she wanted, more freedom to explore, but maybe she didn't expect me to want the same. Saturday night, everything between Betty and me finally exploded. She accused me of using the idea of an open relationship to punish her, saying that my willingness to date other women was vindictive. According to her, she was just asking for some grace to explore her feelings, but I wasn't convinced. I told her that she hadn't shown any real remorse for cheating on me and seemed to want an open-ended pass to do it again. I brought up that our friends had told me she had asked them to stay quiet about what really happened at the wedding, which made me feel like I still wasn't getting the full story. I asked her if she thought it was fair for her to go off and be with other people while I waited at home like some love-struck puppy, just waiting for her to come back and throw me a little attention. Things quickly escalated from there, and we both ended up saying hurtful things to each other. At that point, I laid out 3 options for moving forward. First, we could stay monogamous, postpone the wedding, and go to couples counseling. If we reached a good place, we could continue with the wedding but with a prenup to protect me if she cheated again or changed her mind. The second option was an open relationship, where we would both date other people, giving her space to explore her sexuality on her own terms. In a year or so, we could revisit the idea of marriage if we were still together by then. The third option was a full separation, where she would move out, and we would go our separate ways. If she later decided she wanted monogamy and I hadn't moved on, we could try again. But it would be a fresh start, not just picking up where we left off. Betty said she needed some time to think, so she packed a few things and went to stay with friends for a couple of days. Before she left, I made it clear that if she accidentally cheated while she was away, she shouldn't come back except to get the rest of her belongings. This morning, I got a text from her that simply said, "I'm so sorry." When I asked what she meant, she didn't respond, and my call went straight to voicemail. Now, I'm not planning to reach out again. I'll let her contact me when she's ready, but for now, I'm done chasing after answers. Whatever her apology meant, I'm preparing myself for the possibility that the worst is yet to come. On Wednesday, Betty had her regular appointment with her therapist. She later called me while on her way to her friend's house, apologizing for some of the things she had said during our argument and asking if she could come home to talk things out. I told her to stay at her friend's that night and take some time to really think about what she wanted. We agreed she could come home on Thursday, and we'd have a proper discussion. When Thursday arrived, we sat down over dinner and started to talk. We both apologized for letting things get heated and for saying things we didn't mean. Betty explained that after reflecting on her sessions with her therapist and several deep conversations with her best friend, she had decided not to explore her bisexual urges. She told me the idea of a fully open relationship, where I would also be free to sleep with other people, was terrifying for her. Getting married was more important to her than chasing those feelings. Her original idea was to explore if acting on her attraction to women would fill something missing in her life. But when I asked her if she was looking for just a one-night stand or something more, she couldn't give me a clear answer. That's when I pointed out that it didn't sound very monogamous or fair to me. She agreed and said that was why she had decided to let go of the idea. Then she brought up the save-the-date notices I had canceled for our wedding. She had been getting calls from people asking what was going on, and at first, she had no idea what they were talking about. She was upset that I had done that without consulting her. I reminded her that she had dropped two major bombshells on me: first, that she was bisexual, and second, that she had cheated on me at the wedding. She then left, only texting me a cryptic "I'm so sorry" and going silent after that. I told her that while I didn't give anyone specific details about why we postponed the wedding, people had started speculating that she had cheated on me. Betty then switched gears, suggesting that we could still get back on track and get married next spring. I wasn't convinced. I told her that after everything, if one of us ever had to go out of town, I'd constantly worry about her cheating on me again, especially after she had just admitted to wanting to explore her sexuality. I said that maybe, after a lot of couples therapy, we could get back to a healthy place. But it wasn't realistic to think we could do that by the end of the year. It would be reckless to start planning the wedding again or making any financial commitments before we even knew if therapy was going to work. I also told her I wanted a prenup to protect everything I had brought into the relationship, as well as my future savings and retirement. I added that if we bought a house, she would forfeit any equity if things didn't work out. When she protested, I calmly explained that if she planned to be faithful and committed, the prenup would never come into play, but it would give me peace of mind. These conversations have been ongoing for the past few days. Betty seems eager to sweep what happened at the wedding under the rug and move forward with our wedding plans. In her mind, exploring her bisexuality isn't worth losing our relationship. For now, we're back together and planning to start counseling soon. However, after reflecting on everything, I've realized that I rushed into the idea of an open relationship, hoping to give Betty the freedom to explore her new feelings. But now, I'm not as willing to go down that path. In fact, I'm starting to think that separation might be the better option. Maybe we need to break up for now and see where our lives lead. I don't want to spend the next few years together only for her to change her mind again or, worse, to cheat on me later. It's not what I want, but I also know I don't want to live with that kind of uncertainty. Counseling started off on a bad note. The moment I walked into the office and saw a large pride flag hanging on the wall, I had a sinking feeling. Our therapist seemed heavily biased toward Betty's situation. The therapist ignored her cheating and focused on how I should support her awakening and self-discovery. Nothing was said about my feelings or my needs. Instead, it became all about how Betty was confused, and I was failing to give her a safe space to explore who she is. The entire session felt like a pile-on, and to make it worse, when the therapist kept pushing me, I looked to Betty, hoping she'd say something in my defense or acknowledge my feelings, but she said nothing. That hurt the most. After that, I pretty much shut down for the rest of the session. Toward the end, the therapist tried to bring me back into the conversation, probably realizing she had lost me completely. On the drive home, Betty attempted to talk to me, but I just gave her the same three answers I'd been repeating during the session. Sure, nope, and maybe. It was all I could muster at that point. It turns out this therapist was recommended by her individual counselor. Not a great start to say the least. The next day at work, I got a call from Betty's mom, demanding to know why we were postponing the wedding. She mentioned that her family and friends had already started making plans. I told her she needed to ask Betty about that. But she kept pressing, so I finally told her the truth, that Betty had kissed someone at the wedding, and that's why things were on hold. Then, I hung up. Less than an hour later, Betty called, furious that I had told her mom. I explained that I had only mentioned the kiss and the wedding being postponed. I hadn't said anything about her coming out to me. I also told her that she needed to sit down with her mom and tell her the full truth, though I wasn't going to hold my breath waiting for that to happen. Later that day, I got a text from her mom, telling me I needed to suck it up and move past everything. She even implied that it might be my fault for not going to the wedding with Betty in the first place. It was a long text, basically giving me a lecture on what I needed to do. When Betty got home from work, I showed her the text and told her she needed to deal with her mom, or I would be forced to tell her the whole story the next time she decided to lay into me. Betty promised she would handle it and asked for some time to explain things to her mom. To top things off, Betty has suddenly become very protective of her phone, another massive red flag. The other day, I went to charge mine and unplugged hers to use the charger, and she practically flew across the room to snatch it out of my hand. Later, I managed to sneak a peek at her phone while she was asleep, only to find that she had changed the access code, something she had never done before. Curious, I checked our phone bill online and saw several long calls to a number with a Colorado area code, which I found out is where the girl she kissed is from. At this point, I am mentally exhausted. The gaslighting, the lies, the constant feeling like I'm treading water, it's all too much. Even our intimacy feels off now, lacking the passion we once had. It feels like I'm being love-bombed with hollow words and empty gestures. Tomorrow, we're supposed to go to a cookout at her parents' house. And I'm going to try my best to keep my cool. But after we get back, I'm telling Betty I'm done. I'll give her the choice, she can either keep the apartment or move out, but either way, she's free to explore whatever makes her happy, it just won't be with me. I've already told my parents and a few close friends about everything that's been going on. My tribe is ready to support me and help with the move when the time comes. My dad vetoed my mom's suggestion that I move back home, saying what I really needed was a new puppy. He's probably right. I'm too old to move in with my retired parents anyway. Now that I've made my decision, it feels strangely peaceful. To everyone who told me this was coming, you were right. It's time for me to move on with my life. Betty and I returned early from a cookout at her parents' house, and I had planned for my sister to be there when we got back as a witness, but she was delayed. For a couple of hours, we waited, tension building as I knew what was coming. Once my sister arrived, I gathered us all in the living room and told Betty I was done, I couldn't do this anymore. I said I had lost all trust in her, and no matter how much I wanted to see a way forward, there wasn't one. The best thing for both of us was to go our separate ways. Betty was confused, insisting that she had been honest since her confession about what happened at the wedding. I asked if she had been in contact with the girl she kissed, and she denied it. I pressed her, asking to see her phone. She refused, saying it would violate her privacy and the privacy of the people she had spoken to. Fine, I said, then who's the person with the 720 area code you've been calling? Maybe I should call and see who picks up. She didn't answer, but at that moment, it didn't really matter. The refusal told me everything I needed to know, reinforcing the fact that trust was already shattered. I gave her a choice, she could either move out, or I would. I also told her I'd return whatever she had contributed to our wedding savings account. She tried to get my sister to leave or talk to me privately, but I explained I had been advised to have a witness present, just in case. What started with tears and anger eventually led to a calm conversation that lasted over an hour and a half, spilling into almost midnight. We went through everything, but I couldn't be convinced otherwise. The damage was done. By the next morning, Betty had decided to move back to her parents' house temporarily. The three of us packed her things while waiting for her dad and brother to come and collect her stuff. During this time, she made one last effort, asking me to reconsider therapy with a different counselor. I told her it would be pointless. I could never trust her again, and that was no way to live, for either of us. So that's how it ended. Not much of an ending, maybe, but the closure I needed. Sometimes there's no grand finale, just the quiet reality of moving on. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Red Relationships to never miss a future upload.